Hello, this is Debbie. I am here going to show my pressure canner and all the different items that come with your pressure canner so you can begin pressure canning in your own home. I had bought this Presto pressure canner a few years back, and because of not knowing how to use it and being kind of apprehensive about you and nervous about using it, I let it sit for so long. I wish I had not. I wish I'd have been canning the whole time because it is pretty simple. You have to pay attention to your gauges and your heat settings. But other than that, it's a learning curve. And once you step into it, you will really enjoy canning up your own foods. Whatever pressure canner, there's many different types out there. I bought this simple Presto pressure canner. It has the gauge on it already. It has the steam vent, and it's an easy locking lid. You line up the grooves with the groove on this side in order to get it to lock in place. It's very simple, and when you turn it, it is secure. So it's simple to close and get ready. Now, your pressure canner, you can get a kit, or just the pressure canner, but I got the kit where you had the jar that takes the hot jars out of your pressure canner. You have this little device, which is called a debubbler. When you put your foods in your jar, you go around and make sure you get your bubbles out. I will take you through the jarring process at another time. I just wanted to show some of the items that come with your pressure canner and what they're for. Now, pressure canners, they come with a weight. This Presto just comes with its own weight, and that's a 10-pound pressure. It builds it up to pressure. So for my area, the elevation is 10 pounds of pressure. So that's what I have to come up to in order for safe canning methods. The reason you do that, when you come up to pressure, you have to maintain that pressure for quart jars 90 minutes. And then if it's pints, you can do it for 75 minutes. But that sterilizes your food. Everything in this jar is sterilized when you bring it up to the pounds in your area. Some people can go all the way up to 15, but between 10 and 11 for my area here in Missouri. That makes your food safe and shelf stable. You go by your manual. That's the safest way to go when you're starting out with your pressure canner. And then you have a funnel for filling your jars, and your pressure canner will come with a rack. You put that in the bottom of your pressure cooker, and that way your jars are not right on the bottom of your pressure cooker, because then that can damage your jars. Too much heat right on the bottom. I'm sure many of you have grandparents and family that have canned up their own food in their own pantries. And they've done it for years. Generations have canned their own foods. And I had made yesterday a great big pot of chicken chili. And we had a meal lot yesterday, and I put some in the refrigerator in another pan for another day. But the extra, when I make a big pot, I want to can a few jars and put it away on my pantry shelf for later. And so that's what I've done. I've filled my jars with the extra chicken chili, and I'm going to show you the process I go through in order to process them. Now, when you're processing your jars, if they're cold, these were cold because I put them in the refrigerator overnight. You start out in your pressure canner with cold water. That way there's not any damage to your jars with the temperature change. And if you have a big pot of hot food and you're putting it in your jars, then you have to have hot water and your pressure canner on the stove heating up. That way there's no shock to your jars. You want to protect your jars. So I'm going to be starting out with cold water. Now, in your pressure canner, there is a line at the bottom that shows where to fill it. And usually it's that first line at the very bottom. That's all you need. And so that's what I've done. And so when you do that, you just sit your jars. They're cold right now, of course. And so you sit your jars inside your pressure canner. Now this pressure canner will hold up to 7 quarts, and it'll hold 14 pints. You can put pints in 2 layers in your pot. When you're canning, it's best to at least have about 3 or 4 jars. I like to fill it up, but I didn't have enough for 7, so I had enough for 4 jars. So I'm going to get this over to the stove, and I'll transfer you over there in just a moment. Okay, I got it set up over here on the stove. Usually I put my jars in it over here at the stove. So today I just wanted to show you a demonstration at the table. Since it's cold water, I will set my burner at a lower rate so it comes up to heat slowly. You know, start warming the water first. And you'll get your lid up on your pressure canner so it starts warming up inside. Just like that. Now I find I have a bigger burner here, but I find that gets hot way too fast. So I have one of my smaller burners. I guess it's the medium one, I guess you could say. And it helps me adjust the heat a little bit easier as I'm coming up to pressure on my canner. It'll take a little while for it to come up to pressure. So I got my heat on about a 3.5 right now, so it starts warming up the cold water. And I will bring you back when things start building and show you what's next. I forgot one important detail before it gets hot. I'm glad I thought about it. I gotta take that off. Take that pressure gauge off. And then to keep your jars clean inside your pressure canner, if you got hard water, it will show up on your jars. You take about 1/4 cup of white vinegar and you put that in your water. Don't pour it on your jar, just put it down in the water. That way your jars will come out clean. So I missed that point, and I'm glad I saw that weight, because that wasn't supposed to be on there either. So I'll get back with you in a minute. Okay, I have our canning pot up on the stove top, and we're waiting for it to come up to pressure. You want it to have a solid stream of steam coming out of this vent. And then we'll set the timer for 10 minutes and wait for the steam to push all the air out of your canner for at least 10 minutes. But first we gotta wait for a solid stream of steam to come out of the pressure canner. And now, actually, the button that's in the back here, it just popped up. So now we can go ahead and set the timer for 10 minutes. So for it to vent at least 10 minutes. So I'll go 10 minutes, start. And now we wait for 10 minutes, and then we put our weight on top of the canner. Be back in a few minutes. Actually, as this pressure canner is venting, you will hear the air coming out. That's steam there, but you'll hear the air coming out as well. It has a different type of sound. We let it do this for 10 minutes. When you start building up this pressure and letting out the steam, you'll want your stove top about 8.5, something like that, pretty high. Got 7 minutes to go. Okay, our timer has went off, and now you see the steady white stream of steam coming out of there. And you use some tongs to put that weight on there because you can get burnt. So I just always use something to put it on there. Now we let this build pressure up to 10 pounds. And we'll adjust our heat as it comes up. You'll see the temperature gauge start rising now that the pressure is building. When it's talking about building up pressure, it's talking about raising the heat that's inside your pressure canner. That's the heat building. When it gets up to about a 5, then I'll drop the heat back to probably about 7 or 6. That way it won't overshoot our goal. You have to gradually drop it back, but yet still maintain it going upward. Once you start canning and you get to knowing your own stove and the heat settings that work with your pressure canner, you'll get really adjusted to it. Even though you still got to watch it, very carefully. But once you know your settings, it's pretty easy from there. Now we're getting ready to come up to a 5, and I'll drop it back a little bit because I still have it at about 8.5 on the or close to high, pretty high on my burner. Okay, we're at 5. I'm gonna drop it back to about 6.5 to a 7. It'll still continue to build, but a little bit slower. The reason you want the slow, gradual increase is you don't want your canning jars to siphon, and that's when some of the liquid that's inside your jars will try to seep out. So you have to gradually build it a little at a time and then maintain the pressure the same way. If you go too high from your poundage, from your pressure in your area, it can also siphon. But for the most part, it's just building it gradually so everything stays a little gradual at a time. Kind of like climbing a mountain and going down the other side. You want to build it gradually. Once we get up to 10 pounds, and then I'll go ahead and set our timer for 90 minutes, which is an hour and 30 minutes on our timer for our quart jars. And you'll maintain the 10 pounds or 11 pound pressure for 90 minutes. Okay, I'm going to drop it back a little bit more. I'll put it at about a 4.5 now because it's coming up pretty quick. I might even drop it back to a 3.5. For my stovetop, usually just a little bit past 2, not even 2.5 maintains usually my pressure for 10 pounds for the full 90 minutes, even though I do watch it and I adjust it accordingly up or down. But for the most part, it's usually right about, it's not 2.5, probably 2.2 on my stovetop. And you'll learn what's the best setting for yours. Okay, we're getting up to that 10 pound range. I'm going to set it at the 2.2 where I normally do. And I'm going to set my timer, 90 minutes, start, and the pressure canner has started. So I will be back when the time is up, and I'll show you what to do next. Okay, our time has been an hour and 30 minutes for our pressure canner, and we've maintained the 10 pound pressure rate. And now that it's reached the timers went off, you completely turn it off. And after you turn it off, you just leave it set and cool down on its own all the way down. You want this gauge all the way at 0, and this little thing in the back, all the way, it'll drop down. That holds the pressure. It'll drop down. And then it'll be safe to take off your weight. So we'll be back as soon as it gets completely cooled down, and we'll remove our jars. Okay, we've got to 0. The button in the back is completely down. I took off the weight because it was already at 0. Now when you open these, you want to use heat gloves because it's hot. So you just turn it and let it release on its own before you take the lid off. And then always open the lid away from you because of all that hot steam. Alright. Now, take your gloves off. And I got my mat for my jars sitting over here. I got a mat here. My gloves over there. Now you take your jar grabber. That takes out your hot jars. And you just take what you can and pull them out of the canner. And canning your own food is that simple. And you just let these sit as they cool down, and they will, some of these have already, the button is already popped in, so they're already sealed. Once they're completely cooled down, then you loosen your rims on your jars. It's already sealed. Now, to keep from losing track of your jar, the rims, you just loosen them. So that way if something would come unsealed during storage, you'll know it. But that way your lids don't get lost, your rings don't get lost. So that's one of the ways I do it. And now that concludes how to go about using your pressure canner to can your own storage. So I hope this was helpful to you. And if you have any questions, just shoot me a message and we'll go from there. Thank you for joining me today, and I hope this was helpful to you. And thank you for following my channel.